Hey everyone, in today's video, I want to share 5 tips to help develop confident illustrators in your K-2 classroom. Now you might be wondering, why are you doing an entire video dedicated to the illustrations of a story instead of writing? And if you've been following me for a while, you will know that I always say the illustrations are the story. We know, especially in the K-2 level, that our youngest writers have so much more to say and so much more storytelling than they can actually get words on paper. So in today's video, I have 5 tips to help get a little bit more out of your students and really turn them into illustrators. If you are ready, give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and let's dive in. Diving right in, tip number 1 is that we all need a mindset shift. Now I say we all, meaning teachers and students, sometimes need a mindset shift when they are thinking about illustrations. I've done tons of webinars in the past for K-2 teachers, and I always talk about how illustrations are the story and how we can start there and build from there. And I always get questions, and rightfully so, of teachers saying, okay, but what do we do if my students don't like to draw? Or they say they don't like to draw, or they don't know how to draw, they're not illustrators, so on and so forth. And while that definitely happens, it happened many times in my own classrooms, this is where we as the teachers need to kind of make that mindset shift here. We need to tell students that we aren't, just drawing, we are actually telling our story. And by doing that, we need to show that the illustrations is the same as the writing. They are just as important, especially for getting students to view themselves as writers. Now we can do this in a few different ways, but I did want to point out this quote right here. This is from the journal The Reading Teacher. This article came out in 2021 and it was all about scaffolding composition in pre-K, but I thought that this quote was so important as it showed how our young writers view themselves even as young as preschool and pre-K. And it says preschoolers develop their own writing identities or perceptions of themselves as writers through their early experiences. Now, why is this important or relevant to this video? Now, I often talk about those K1 learners because those are the questions I get the most about those very beginning learners and how we can actually teach them to write and, what are some important activities we should be doing for them other than teaching them basic sentence structure and of course their, letters and sounds. They need to learn all of that first. But that doesn't mean they aren't writers. And we don't want our students to think that just because they can't write anything yet means that they're not writers. We want to tell them that they are storytellers and that they can tell many different stories through oral language as well as drawing. And I do always point out to my teachers that the kindergarten Common Core standards literally include drawing and dictation in the standard. It doesn't say they need to compose an entire narrative written down yet. It says with a combination of writing, drawing, and dictating, students will be able to blah, blah, blah. So the first step is that we as teachers fully understand this mindset, right? That the illustrations are the story, we can tell so much, our students have tons to share, etc. But we also need to pass that along to our students, and we can do that through wordless picture books. There are so many great wordless picture books out there that really show to students you don't need words to tell a story. And that sometimes you don't even need words to be an author. So this is important just to relay to your students. And then on top of that, we really want to make sure that we are highlighting the success at every stage along the writing process that our students are in. Meaning that while we certainly want to emphasize, proper sentences and punctuation and capitalization and all of those proper things we want our students to get to, we don't want to downplay the importance of those pre-writing stages. And that's going to include our illustrations. So tip 1 is a mindset shift. Also, I'm going to go ahead and link that journal article down below just because it was a great one if you want to read more about scaffolding our instruction with illustrations. All right, tip number 2 for developing confident illustrators is we need to explicitly teach students how to draw. Now, while there is a bunch of research sharing the importance of these illustrations and really highlighting how illustrations are the story, it doesn't really make sense for us to say we value these things, but not spend time teaching it. And I know this can be difficult to think, okay, am I really going to spend an entire lesson, this valuable critical time teaching students how to draw? But the answer is, yeah, You should sprinkle it in there every once in a while. Now, since our time is critical, we don't just want to, teach students how to draw anything without a sort of plan there, but what we do want to do is teach students how to be successful in their illustrations. If we are using those illustrations as a springboard for telling us more about a story, we want to teach students how to draw characters. We want to teach them how to draw a setting that's going to give us more information. I always love to teach students how to draw emotions on our faces. In fact, I have this emotions anchor chart right here that I always use with my kids. Now, especially with our characters and our settings, we want to spend a little bit more time getting a little more detailed with our students. So specifically when I'm thinking about characters, we of course want to share that our characters don't always look the same, right? Our characters in our story should represent the people that we see in everyday life. Now, if we're writing a personal narrative, of course, the character is going to look like you or the people that you know. And when I'm explaining that, people and backgrounds don't all look the same, I like to accompany that with real life pictures. I find that it really helps to show, a picture of a bunch of kids with different hairstyles, and then we can watch a video on how to draw different hairstyles. Just a quick video. Again, I also want to point out, I am not an illustrator. I have some, basic skills when teaching students illustrations, but I am not an art teacher, I am not an artist, but that doesn't mean I can't draw. And I want to send that mindset to my students. But thankfully there's YouTube, and YouTube has tons of great drawing videos for kids. So I'm gonna link a few of my favorites. Here is one right here that I love for teaching students how to draw different hairstyles. But like I said, I would also accompany that with an actual photograph, so students kind of see the relation between both. I always start with characters because those seem to be the most difficult for our students. Moving past a stick figure is a real thing. It's very difficult for our kids to do. So why not spend a couple lessons teaching them how to do that? And then boom, they have those skills and those ideas that they can extract and use later. But our backgrounds too, we talk a lot about how the setting really plays a role in our story and how not every page of our book needs to have, a bright sunny day with the sun over in the corner and the rays shining down. Sometimes that's not exactly how it's gonna go, but our students feel very comfortable drawing that background, so they tend to do that. If we teach them just a few other ways to make different backgrounds, again, they can take it and use it going forward. I believe I already said this, but any YouTube videos that I really enjoy for teaching students how to draw characters or a background, I will go ahead and link down in the description. And then also that character emotion sheet, I always use that in my SJT Writing Club, but I will link that for free down below as well. All right, tip number 3 for developing confident illustrators is to dissect illustrations. When we are teaching our students about characters and setting, we don't want to just focus on the author's craft and the words that are written down, but we also want to point out what illustrators do to add to the story. It's a relatively simple thing to do, but we do need to keep it top of mind, where we can point out some of the decisions and craft that the illustrators are doing in a story and how it actually helps propel the story forward by working with the author. I know when I'm teaching my students about being authors, we talk a lot about how the author always has a purpose in their story and they choose different words on purpose and they add different, mechanics into their stories, different punctuation. And we talk about the meaning of that and how we can add that to our own stories, but we can do the same with the illustrations as well. I recently read another journal article, I think it was from the Reading Research Quarterly journal. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I will link it down below. And this one specifically talked about how we can dissect different illustrations in a story and how there's all these different things we can look for. Like I said, I'll link it below because it actually listed out a bunch of different tools that illustrators use that you can again share with your K-2 students to let them know, hey, the illustrator used this here. How did that help our story? How could we do that in our own stories? Here are just 3 of the Illustrator tools that I noticed that I would point out with my own kids. A double page spread. So when in a story does all of a sudden the illustrator take over both pages and how the illustration carries from one to the next. That is a really fun tool for students, and I like to try to squeeze it into at least one of our genre-based units to have students add a little bit more. Also, we have positionality, so where are the objects and characters in the story and why did the illustrator put them there? And then of course visual elements as well. And visual elements can mean a bunch of different things, but it could mean different shading, it could mean different background pieces that the illustrator put. But basically we want to make sure we are pointing out specific things the illustrator is also doing to share a story. It's not all about the author. Well, in our students' case, they're both the author and the illustrator, so they get, double the points. Tip number 4 is to incorporate drawing more often in your classrooms. Now, this can be kind of an easier way to implement these small little drawing lessons if you implement that on different times. Maybe you don't use your whole writing block to show students how to draw characters, but instead, spread out throughout the week, you have a few different drawing lessons built in. As for how you could do this, you could definitely incorporate some seasonal directed drawings. Art for Kids Hub is one of the absolute best sites out there for directed drawings for students. My kids absolutely love them. Not only do my kids do them at home, but when they are at school, either during indoor recess, morning meeting, maybe to go with something that students are writing or learning about. Pretty much for any skill, you can find an object or an animal or something for your students to learn how to draw. And the videos are pretty quick. But while that one is just for fun, we also know that drawing and writing is a great way for students to think about and process what they're learning. So for some other ideas, in literacy, you can have students quickly draw the beginning, middle, and end of a story after you read one. You could have students create a missing persons poster based on a story that you just read, and they would have to, draw the character and also come up with some fun character traits about that person to describe them. If you've read an informational book, students might draw a diagram of an animal based on what they learned. In math, students can draw all sorts of different things. They can draw addition and subtraction equations. You can teach them different ways to actually draw shapes. Quick note, I did a whole 2D and 3D shape video where I talk about this, but it's actually really important for students to be able to represent those shapes based on what they know about the shape's attributes, so corners, vertices, all that fun stuff. So it's actually really beneficial to have them learn how to draw the shapes, and then based on the shape knowledge they have in drawing shapes, they can probably draw more in other subjects as well. For phonemic awareness, you can have students draw images that start with the B sound, or draw an image that has 2 syllables. For phonemic awareness, there's tons of ideas you could do, all based on that exact premise that I just said. But again, it lets you know kind of what students are learning, and it helps them process their learning through drawing. So tip 4 is to make sure you incorporate drawing more often. And last but not least, tip number 5 is to use illustrations as a springboard to student writing. Now, as you've been teaching students to draw more and really emphasizing the importance of illustrations, you want to ask your students questions about their illustrations. If they just learned about volcanoes and they want to draw a volcano, you can ask them, how would we draw a volcano erupting? What's something we could do? We can actually think aloud and talk about it out loud before students go off and do it, the same way we do with their writing. Now, once they actually have that illustration, we can again ask some more questions. What's going on here? Was anybody around when the volcano was erupting? What time of day was it? We continue to ask questions, and then they can write more to their story. If you had students draw a picture of something that starts with B, you can ask them next, okay, what did you draw? I drew a ball. Let's write ball starts with B. And you can give them a sentence frame as needed, but here again, we're starting with that illustration, and it's a springboard for let's practice some sentence writing skills once we're there, right? So first grade, this is a great time to start that. End of kindergarten for sure, especially if you give them a sentence frame. But let's always look at our illustration, ask more questions to get details, and then write about it. While we do fully recognize the importance of our illustrations, we also want to always make sure we're connecting it to storytelling, which is going to lead to our writing. Now, if you've been around for a while, you might know that one of my favorite ways to start a story is say and sketch. We know oral language precedes written language, so by saying something aloud, drawing a picture of it, we can get many more ideas for our students to write about. And I love to follow this say and sketch sheet right here. You can see we have 3 boxes, and this one comes with temporal words, first, next, and last. And here I have students go through each step. They will say first, and they will actually say aloud what they want to write. So if they're writing a personal narrative, they might say, first, I went to the beach with my mom. And then I'll have them pause and actually draw a picture in that box. Then we say, next, what did I do next? Next, I started collecting sand for a sandcastle. Draw a picture. Just a quick sketch, it doesn't have to be fully detailed. And again, the more background knowledge they have around drawing, the better at that they'll be. And then they say last. Last, I built the sandcastle and a wave knocked it down. And then again, they go ahead and draw it. And I actually have them spend a day or two doing just that say and sketch sheet, because that is the brainstorming process. That's the springboard again for our writing. Then our students can reference each of those steps and turn it into a narrative. Now again, that's something I would do definitely in first grade. In kindergarten, we will focus more on those illustrations. We can add labels to our writing. We might start with a simple sentence for each one. You can differentiate it as needed, but it's such an important step for our students to take to really scaffold that writing. All right, so there were 5 tips for you to help develop confident illustrators in your classrooms. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I will link any freebies down in the description, as well as those 2 journal articles I mentioned. So if they're not there, make sure you write a little comment and just let me know. Sometimes I forget, but I will definitely try to include those for you so you can check them out on your own. If you have any other tips for illustrators in your classroom, let us know in the comments. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new video. See you in the next one. Bye.